Are we live? Yes, looks like we are live. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenue, all of you, my followers of darkness, shadow scavengers, and villainy aficionados. Welcome to another Villains Review episode. And today, I'm going to review, which is actually kind of like my very first villain review whatsoever. I'm going to review a very specific Lord of the Rings franchise villain, more precisely from the last movie that they did, which of course is Lord of the Rings: The War of the Rohirrim. And when I talk about that movie, I mean about Wulf, the main villain of the movie. And also, as I said, my very first Lord of the Rings movie I ever did. Well, not movie. I meant villain. So, without any further ado, I'm your host, Lauro Shadows, and this, of course, is a villains review. So, let's begin, shall we? So basically, when we start, with the villain's history of the character, basically in this case, when it comes to Wolf, and yet again, I'm really surprised that this is like my very first Lord of the Rings villain I'm going to review. I mean, you have to start with something. But anyway, so Wolf, son of Freka, is basically the overall ruler of the tribe called the Dunlandings, who played a big part in the War of the Rohirrim, especially on Helm's Deep. Who basically the whole thing started when Freka, his father, and him they went to Rohan asking for Helm Hammerhand's daughter's Hera hand in marriage with Wolf, and of course Hera rejected him and all of that. But of course the whole crazy shenanigans begins when Helm Hammerhand challenged Freka into a fist fight and basically killing him with just one blow. And that's where basically Wolf said, "You're going to pay for this with your life." Basically vowing revenge against Helm Hammerhand and his family for what they did to his father. And that's basically where the whole shenanigans starts. So this is kind of like, the overall preview of the villain, or should I say the villain's history. One thing also I do have to mention is, Wolf is also, which is not a very unusual thing, but he's also a childhood friend of our main hero of the story, which of course is Princess Hera. Now, about the character itself, or should I say himself. Basically, Wolf is a very typical. If I have to put him like in a type of villainy, I would say he's a very typical vengeful warlord. Basically, like a very brutish, very hot-headed, and there's a lot of personalities that he does possess, which basically are very traditional for like a barbarian slash warlord. Like when it comes to like fictional warlords, or if we talk about like historical warlords, like Attila the Hun. Basically, there's all sorts of like elements of Wolf, that kind of makes him like a very barbaric, leader. Now, one of the things, which of course, I mentioned that in my villain's history, one of the main pointers of this character is, of course, what he wants. And of course, I've said before, is revenge. More precisely, revenge against Helm Hammerhead for what he did to his father, which, again, from the story, I can definitely conclude saying that we have another villain who has a Captain Ahab syndrome. Now, of course, if anyone doesn't know what I mean, I still can't believe I called it like that. But basically, Captain Ahab syndrome, again, my theory, is basically when a villain becomes obsessed with revenge, like, in which, like, basically he doesn't care about anything around him anymore, like about his men, about his mission, about like, the casualties, like, he doesn't, those kind of villains, they don't give a shit. They became obsessed with their targets, and they wish to destroy it no matter what, if it means bringing everything they have down, with them, basically. So that's kind of like Captain Ahab syndrome, as I like to put it that way. But either way, one of the things I found very interesting, kind of peculiar about like Wolf, is like usually like when it comes to Lord of the Rings villains, they usually like are very kind of have a similar elements, so to speak. But still, like even though the character does possess some like very classic like villain characteristics when it comes to like especially when you have like villain who is like a son of royalty, who's kind of like, craving for power, who like, craves the throne, tries to prove himself, tries to prove to his enemies, to like his men, that he's basically, the toughest of the tough, basically, that he's worthy of that particular throne, so to speak. Which again, lots of like, very similar, like, barbaric, elements. And again, also in the same time, you can also kind of lean in towards, I mean, I'm going to talk about that, in strengths and weaknesses, but like, I would say it's a very interesting character. I would say it's a very interesting character with a lots of like, old school classic villain like, elements. But I really found him interesting, like, from kind of like, his overall origin story to like, his mannerism to the way how he fights, for most of the time, when he can be like a very skillful, leader when it comes to like strategies and tactics, try to, destroy Hammer and his family, try to do whatever it takes, to kind of like, hurt him the way how he was hurt, basically, So there's a lot of elements about him, and also, I will say this: he's actually a pretty tough fighter, that's for sure. But the one thing for certain I can tell about him is that this guy is like very short tempered, very unstable, arrogant. He has a lot of insecurity, that I can tell you as well. But also at the same time, he hates basically being proven weak. That's for sure when it comes to his character. Now, one of the things I also have to talk about, is, of course, is the villain's goal. Now, I mentioned that before already. The villain's goal for Wulf is basically take over Rohan, but primarily to get revenge on Helm Hammerhand, for killing his father, again, with one strike, I mean, that's why they call him Helm Hammerhand, for fuck's sake. But still, that's basically his two overall, goals that he had, Now, at first, of course, like one of the goals you can kind of say that he was kind of like, he was willing to marry, Hera, basically, kind of like, combining like, two families, so to speak, so kind of, you can kind of say that was kind of like his primary objective. But then after all the shenanigans that happened later, he's like, screw that plan, that plan I don't give a shit about that anymore. Now I'm just simply concentrating on conquering, destroying, and of course, revenge, And of course, one of the things I do have to say about, Wulf when it comes to his overall goal is that, which is usually got like a very traditional thing a villain to do, which is like, when a villain gets hurt, which kind of like also is kind of like the beginning steps of the rise to villainy. Usually, what happens is, is an eye for an eye. Like, hey, you killed my father. I'm going to destroy everything you possess. I'm going to destroy everything you love. Like, for example, with like Wulf, destroying, killing Hammerhand's, two sons, or more precisely Hera's brothers, to kind of like, basically make them feel the same pain that he also was like, feeling, when he lost his father and everything. So, which kind of goes again with an eye for an eye thing, Now, revenge, again, very typical, conquering, elements, when it comes to like, taking over Rohan. But also one of the villain's goals, one of the elements of the villain's goal I have for Wulf, I do have to mention, is that one of the main goals is definitely that he's trying to prove himself to everyone else. Like I mentioned like a few seconds ago. Trying to prove himself, to everyone, that he's not weak, that he's strong, that he won't be, humiliated or, defeated, by anyone, more precisely by a woman, basically, like I will never forget that line when Hera and Wulf had like, the final confrontation, and Wulf is like, do you think I'm afraid of you? Like with such like, confidence, but in the same, well, pretentious confidence, if I can call it like that, but like also in the same time a little bit of arrogance, like and all this kind of like obsession of destroying her and everything, which is something that usually revenge does, but overall, his overall villain's goal, very classic, conquering a kingdom, revenge against the other king or whoever, basically, for the cause of like of the villain's loved ones and everything. Like again, very classic, which is one of the reasons why the type of villain I will put him on is basically the vengeful warlord. Now one of the things also, like every single villain, we have strengths and we have weaknesses. Now when it comes to Wolf's strengths, okay, I will admit he's a tough fighter. That's for sure. He is skilled. He has skills in leadership, skills in tactics and strategies, which of course, when you are a leader of an army, that's usually the most obvious elements you're gonna possess, and everything. So that's for sure. Also, he showed a few times, that he has confidence in himself, to be, the worthy of his father Freka's, throne, and as the leader of the Dunlendings and everything. Like that's also kind of one of these weaknesses, one of those strengths, and also one of the things I do have to admit, the guy, really is a fan of conviction. More precisely, he does have conviction. I'll give him that. I'll give him also credit that he won't stop at anything, until his goal is done, uh, even though sometimes he can be completely unreasonable, which of course for our movie he was, which kind of leads me to his weaknesses. Now, one of the weaknesses, of course, is basically the overall goal, revenge. Because sometimes revenge, if you sometimes basically revenge, if you too much concentrate on it, it could basically lead into despair, into obsession, into paranoia, which kind of basically all lends at the end towards madness, basically, which is one of the reasons why Wolf has the Captain Ahab syndrome, because he literally, through revenge and everything, he literally became obsessed with Hera and basically destroying Helm Hammerhand's family, and everything they hold dear, because and again, this is not from revenge, it just became something personal to him that even has no reason to be personal, outside the father thing, uh, for example, one of the warlords, one of the commanders in his army, trying to reason with him, hey, you won, you then have to destroy them, they just leave them be. You conquered Rohan, you have everything you have everything you wanted to have, okay, that's it, let's go. But Wolf is like, no, I want to destroy every single one of them. I'm not gonna leave until they burn, until they crush the ground, literally, again, literally all that anger, all that arrogance, all that obsession with Helm Hammerhand and his family and Hera, basically in some capacity drew him mad, because in the end he didn't give a shit about his own army or everyone else around him, for that matter. He was, like I said, he was willing to take everyone down just so he can basically complete his mission, his overall vengeance, so to speak. So when it comes to overall weaknesses, like I said, you have arrogance, you have delusion, you have the overconfidence part. You have also in the same time this sense of insecurity that he possesses, especially when he is surrounded with Hera. Because that's one of the things I will say about his character, that he kind of always possessed. For example, when they were kids, when Hera and Wolf were fighting, and basically Hera accidentally gave him that scar. He in the way he said, just leave me, go away before anyone sees you. You could definitely feel in his eyes, you could definitely feel in his portrayal, that in his facial expressions, that he felt embarrassed that he was defeated by a girl, which is exactly the same thing that he possessed when he became older. He, like I said, he has this mindless obsession with being above everyone else. Now, I'm not talking about a Napoleon complex. I know that has nothing to do with it. But the point is, that which is something that vengeance can do to you from time to time. They can draw you into sense of self, false sense of confidence, to give also the same time false a sense of insecurity, which that's exactly what he was. With arrogance, with like underestimating your opponents, which exactly also is one of the other things that he did, you know, as a villain, which is like a very common thing. All the way until the end, when he realized, that he lost everything, and he's like, willing to fight toward till the end, because now after he lost his army and everything, he has nothing to lose. He has nothing to lose. So if it means like he's gonna die, at least he's gonna die, trying to accomplish, what he wanted from the very start, crushing literally Hammerhand and most of all Hera, because of this like obsession that he wants to be better than her, because of like he wants to be stronger than her, that he doesn't want to be humiliated by someone like her, like which is basically kind of like this idea of like not being embarrassed or humiliated by a girl, basically, to be better than him and everything, which is again, it's not a very unusual thing for villains, especially when you have like where the main hero is a woman and the main villain is the main villain is a man. That kind of element you usually have those kind of villains, when it comes to fiction overall, But even though with everything I said, I do give him credit for. I do give him credit. That basically he did for a brief moment, like he did. Conquered Rohan. He killed Hera's two brothers. To kind of like make her and Helm suffer. The same way he suffered for the loss of his father. He did. Draw them into the Helm's Deep, basically. So far. That basically. That almost kind of like you would say, like they died of like cold and without food and everything. Like you could kind of say that he almost literally crushed them in a way. So like I said, he has conviction, that's for sure. Commitment to accomplish his revenge, skills as a leader, strategies, tactics. He also can fight. I mean, he can he can definitely pull up a sword. That's for sure. He showed. I would say he shows a little bit of intelligence, because when you are a leader of a tribe, of course you're going to have, some kind of a, like sort of intelligence, But overall, I would say, even with all this strengths and everything, like, he is devoured in a way by his weaknesses, which, like I said, is, overconfidence, arrogance, obsession, this thirst for revenge that kind of almost draw him mad, this kind of like, obsession with also being on top of everyone else, destroying everything in his path, like the greed, the hunger that he possessed for power, all of that basically brought him to his doom. But overall, for everything I've seen, he was a very fascinating villain as a character itself. He was a very fascinating villain, very classically written. Like I said, because like when you look at every type of villains, you have to look, also at what kind of timeline they come from, what type of villains they are. Like to kind of basically understand them a little bit deeply in a way. Like for example, like I said, in Wolf's case, he's a warlord. He is a warlord with a really big barbaric side, basically. But if I have to give him a rating, like 1 out of 10 shadows, I think like my rating would be 7.5 out of 10 shadows. I mean, like I said, he proved himself a lot from the movie. I give him credit that he was a very interesting villain. But the reason why he's not 10 out of 10 is because like the same main things that usually when you have a villain with revenge as a goal, usually they have the same pointers, they have the same elements that in the end destroys them. That brings them to their own downfall, so to speak. And Wulf possessed them. Wulf basically possessed them all. So, like I said, another patient with the Captain Ahab syndrome, basically. He didn't give a shit about anything, losing his men, him, having the crown and everything. He just simply wanted everyone of Rohan being destroyed. Every single one of them. Only then he'll be accomplished and will have satisfaction in his heart, basically. But until they're gone, nope. I'm going to sacrifice every part of my army just so I can get to them. Even if, like, like I said, that by the end of the movie, he became very psychotic and unreasonable, you know. But overall, I think, like, with everything I said, I think, like, this is it. I think, like, this is it. Yeah, yeah. Here comes to an end to another live, villains review episode. I hope you guys, enjoyed my overall review about Wolf, the Lord of the Dunlendings. I hope you guys, enjoyed it. After that, you guys know the drill. Comment, like, subscribe. Give me your personal thoughts about Wolf as a villain. The overall general thoughts about the War of the Hero movie. What did you thought about it and all? Everything in the comment section down below. And like always, stay tuned for more videos. Don't forget, we have the upcoming Shadow Council episode on Sunday. And after that, who knows? But until then, Lord of Shadows, like always, signing off. And of course, as luck would have it, as I love to say it, later, fuckers.